Hey everyone, and welcome. Today, we're jumping into something called academic language. You've probably heard this term kicked around, right? Well, if you're an educator or parent supporting multilingual learners, really getting what this means is, well, it's everything. It can literally be the key that unlocks a student's entire future. So, let's get into it.
Okay, let's start with a picture I bet a lot of you have seen before. You've got a student, they're super chatty, seem totally confident, and just sound completely fluent in English out on the playground. But then, you put a complex text or a writing assignment in front of them, and suddenly, they're struggling. What is going on there?
Well, this leads us right to something called the fluency misconception. It's this really common trap we fall into, where we assume that because a student has great social conversational skills, they've mastered the whole language. And this can be a huge disservice, because it often means we pull away really important academic support way too soon.
So here's what we're going to do today. We'll start by digging into that fluency misconception. Then, we'll unpack the two different kinds of language proficiency. After that, we'll get into the three building blocks of academic language, look at some really practical classroom strategies, and we'll wrap up with why an asset-based mindset is a total game changer.
All right, first up, let's really pull apart this fluency misconception. We've got to get to the heart of what makes social skills so different from academic skills.
That social playground language we all see, it actually has a name. It's called BICS, which stands for Basic Interpersonal Communication Skills. Think of it as the language of right here, right now. It's supported by all the context around it. Gestures, facial expressions, what you're both looking at. It's super important for making friends and connecting, but it's not the whole story. Not even close.
So, how do we connect that social language to what's needed in the classroom? This question brings us to a researcher named Jim Cummins, and he gave us this absolutely groundbreaking framework for understanding the two different types of language. For a lot of educators, learning this is a huge aha moment.
This image of an iceberg is the perfect way to think about it. That social language, BICS, that's just the tip of the iceberg. It's what we see and hear every day, and it develops pretty fast, usually in just a year or two. But beneath the surface, that's where the real bulk is. That's CALP, or academic language. This is the language of textbooks, of abstract ideas. And here's the kicker. Developing this deeper language can take 5 to 7 years, or even longer. That massive gap between what we see on the surface and what's really going on underneath, that's where our students can go lost.
So CALP, Cognitive Academic Language Proficiency, that is our goal. This is the language you need to do things like analyze a character's motivation in a story, or synthesize information from 3 different articles, or evaluate a scientific argument. It's not about what's right in front of you, it's about big, complex ideas. And this is the language that absolutely requires intentional, direct support from us.
Okay, so we know CALP is the goal, but what is it actually made of? Let's break it down into its 3 essential building blocks.
You can really think of academic language as having these 3 main parts. First, you've got vocabulary, the actual words students need. Second is language control, the grammar, the rules for how to put those words together correctly. And third are linguistic forms. This is the ability to build longer, more complex sentences and arguments. Let's take a look at how we can teach each one.
And now for the fun part, the really practical stuff. Knowing the building blocks is one thing, but how do we actually help our students build with them? Let's dive into some real, actionable tools you can start using right away.
Let's start with block number 1, vocabulary. And this is about so much more than just memorizing definitions from a list. It's about arming students with the specific words they need to get into complex, grade-level material.
The trick here is to be really strategic. We want to focus on what are called Tier 2 words. These are those powerful, all-purpose academic words like analyze, compare, and evaluate that show up in every single subject. And of course, we also need to teach the Tier 3 words. That's the content-specific stuff like metaphor in English class or camouflage in science.
A fantastic strategy for this is the Freyer model. Seriously, this thing is great. It's not just about copying a definition. It's a graphic organizer that actually pushes students to think deeply about a word. What are its characteristics? What are some examples? And just as important, what are some non-examples? It builds such a richer, deeper understanding of the word.
And here's what that can look like. When you use tools that get students working together, talking, using visuals, they aren't just memorizing words anymore. They are actively using them, playing with them, owning them. That vocabulary stops being a list on a page and becomes a real tool they can use to think and communicate with precision.
All right, let's move on to our second building block, language control. You can think of this as the rules of the road for a language. It's the grammar and the sentence structure that holds all the ideas together.
Now, for a lot of our multilingual learners, these rules don't just sink in through osmosis. They need to be taught explicitly. This might mean we use sentence frames to practice getting verb tenses right, or we directly teach how a conjunction like although or however totally changes the meaning of a sentence. This kind of direct instruction gives them the blueprint they need to build clear, well-structured communication.
And that brings us to our third and final building block, linguistic forms. Okay, so now our students have the words and they have the rules. How do we help them start producing longer, more sophisticated, more complex language?
The goal here is simple. We want to expand what students can say and write. A really simple but incredibly powerful strategy is just to provide sentence starters that push for more complexity. For example, teaching students to always use because helps them learn to justify their claims. Using so encourages them to explain consequences. This is how we move them from just making simple statements to actually building arguments and connecting their ideas. So here it is, all put together. It's actually pretty simple when you break it down. For vocabulary, our job is to give them the words. For language control, we teach them the rules. And for linguistic forms, we help them build their complexity. When we are intentional about focusing on all three of these, we are building a rock-solid foundation for true academic success.
Okay, for our last section, let's zoom out a bit. Because all of these strategies, all these tools, they work best when they're built on the right foundation, on the right mindset. This is all about shifting our perspective to see what our students bring to the table and how we can truly empower every single one of them.
This is so important. We have to move away from a deficit-based view and fully embrace an asset-based approach. What that means is we stop focusing on what students might be lacking and we start recognizing and celebrating the incredible linguistic and cultural resources they are already bringing into our classrooms every single day.
And why does this matter so much? I mean, what's the big deal? Well, as the source material puts it so perfectly, mastering academic language opens the doors for future opportunity and access, both inside and outside the classroom. This isn't just about passing a test or getting a good grade. This is about equity. It's about lifelong opportunity. So I'll just leave you with this question to think about. In our own work, in our own classrooms and homes, how can we make that conscious shift to move our focus away from what students might be missing and instead focus on the rich, incredible assets they already bring with that?